Okay, welcome everyone. I am Johanna Cronin. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at StartEngine, and we have Howard Marks and Alex Lieberman for a discussion with two CEOs. So before we get started, anyone, if you have questions, comments, you want to ask something of these two founders, just add it to the Q&A. We're going to be doing a Q&A at the end of this with your questions. And if you are a founder and you're watching this and you're like, hey, I want to raise capital, I need funding for my business, you can go to startengine.com and you can click on the raise capital button. So without further ado, I want to introduce quickly Alex Lieberman, CEO and co-founder of Morning Brew, a daily newsletter and media company with over 2 million readers. Alex and his co-founder built Morning Brew from a dorm room project to a $75 million media company in less than 6 years. And Howard Marks, the CEO of StartEngine. He co-founded Activision and Acclaim Games, which is sold to Disney. I also want to mention, I hope this is correct, I think you both went to Michigan. I'm not positive. Is that accurate? Can you confirm it?
It's accurate.
Wow.
We graduated 1 year apart.
Exactly.
Yeah, I started my dorm room with a 300 baud modem, which is very, very slow.
Wow. So the dorm rooms at Michigan, extremely productive.
Which dorm was it yours, Alex?
I was in Markley my freshman year, which I don't know if Markley was around when you went.
Yes, it was. Oh. I went to Moshe Jordan.
Love it. That is still around also.
Wow. So I think there's, an interesting connection between StartEngine and Morning Brew, and that is really that both of you guys are in the business of making things that were previously inaccessible totally accessible to the general public, obviously through very different angles. In this conversation, we're going to talk about a few things. So what are the goals for StartEngine, Morning Brew? How do they relate? How to actually fund your business and raise capital, and just the lessons you guys learned as entrepreneurs along the way. So Alex, I wanted to start with you. First, can you tell a little bit more about Morning Brew, and then also one specific project that you're working on right now that you want everyone to know about?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. It's awesome to have these conversations, also being with a fellow Wolverine. Morning Brew started in Michigan, as you said, and our goal is very simple. We want to empower the modern business leader with engaging and accessible content. And that mission hasn't changed at all, but the way that it's manifested has obviously grown in ambition from a single newsletter that was sent to a couple hundred people in school to now, a full-blown media company that has newsletters, website, interactives, social content, audio content, et cetera, that goes out to more than 3 million people a day. And, you spoke about how there's a lot of similarity between StartEngine and Morning Brew. And I think it's this idea of one, going direct to consumer, and two, creating accessibility for an entire generation of business leaders and investors that previously didn't feel like, for us, business content was accessible. And what we realized is there was a better way to do it that the incumbents would never feel the motivation to do.
That's awesome. And Howard, similarly, tell a little bit more about StartEngine for people who are watching this and don't know what StartEngine is or what we do, and then what something is that you're working on right now that you want everyone to know about.
Yeah, our mission here at StartEngine is to help entrepreneurs achieve their dreams. And this happened because I as an entrepreneur myself, I wanted to give back to the city of LA and invest in great entrepreneurs, and I did. And StartEngine started as an accelerator. But what I found very quickly was that the people I was investing in couldn't get VC money or any money. And I just found that absolutely crazy. And I thought the status quo was no longer acceptable, especially when it was women founders and minorities. I just couldn't understand what was going on. Because I'm not from that industry. And so we started StartEngine as an equity crowdfunding platform, and we've raised over 300 million for hundreds of companies. What we're working on now is we want to prove that not only the consumer wants access into these amazing companies and high risk, clearly, you're investing in startups, but also we want to give them early liquidity. And that is a concept that does not exist because you have to wait 10 plus years usually to have any chance of liquidity. So we're going to try to crack that problem so that you can invest in a mini IPO on StartEngine and then trade.
That's great. And you both touched on this a little bit, but obviously there's something that motivates you to start a company. Becoming an entrepreneur is no easy feat. So Alex, what was the motivation? Why were you like, this is an important thing, this matters to me?
Yeah, so I would say I've always been very creative and curious. Like grew up I remember in kindergarten, I was always like, why do a pen and a highlighter have to be different instruments? Why can't I cut them in half, tie them together, and you can write with your pen, then quickly flip it over and highlight your writing? And I think it's just always been like kind of this childlike brain that has driven me to just explore nooks and crannies of the world and the internet that I find interesting. Interestingly enough, we didn't start Morning Brew because we wanted to be entrepreneurs or make a lot of money or start a business. It literally started by me writing a daily newsletter for students at Michigan who were prepping for job interviews, and had explained to me that they read the Wall Street Journal because that's what their parents told them to do. But they did it out of necessity, not because they actually wanted to. And so I started writing this newsletter half selflessly, half selfishly. Selfishly because I already had my job in finance. I wanted to keep myself sharp. This was a force function to make me do that. And then selflessly because I was just like, there has to be something better, given they're telling me that the status quo isn't good enough. And so I was just writing this for fun, brought Austin Reef on board as my co-founder. He was a reader of this newsletter. And it was one of those things where for the first year of the business, we weren't like, oh yeah, this is going to be a huge thing. We're more like, this is solving a problem. It's serving a need. People are really enjoying it. We're enjoying creating content and being builders. Let's just keep doing it. I think it was only when, I was at Morgan Stanley after college and I was there for a year. During my time there, that's when Austin and I realized that there was something to this, like a commercial opportunity to redefine what business media means for our generation. But that happened, a year and a half after starting to create the product.
And what was it specifically that made you realize, okay, this is an opportunity? Was it a number of subscribers? Was it like the
Yeah.
growth rate? Where was it?
I think it was a combination of organic growth of subscribers and the affinity of the audience, right? Because I think what we proved to ourselves is that we could grow the audience pretty meaningfully without putting a ton of marketing dollars into it, or zero at the time. And so when I left Morgan Stanley, when I quit my job, Austin had rejected his job to work in investment banking and we joined full time. I want to say we were at 75,000 subscribers. And the fact that we got to 75,000 readers just through pure word of mouth and referrals, again, it's nothing close to the 3 million we have today. But even to get to 75,000 with, again, a platform that's not like social media, that it has inherent virality baked into it. There's more friction with sharing a newsletter than social. It told us that people really cared about the content. What also told us that is like we had a robust college ambassador program where college students were like fiending to share Morning Brew to earn swag, like, glasses and stickers. And there are these small awards that, for me, I would think to myself, like, I would never share someone's product to earn stickers. But the fact that there was so much affinity for that told us something. And also just the fact that the beautiful part of an inbox is that it's a really intimate relationship with a consumer, right? Someone opts into your email, it comes into their inbox every day. They can hit reply and write back to you. And the fact, even at 75,000 subscribers, we were getting hundreds of email replies from readers a day, told us that people really cared about the product.
Yeah, it definitely shows a sign of engagement. It's not just like people are viewing it and they have no relationship with it. It's actually a dynamic, which I do think is really hard to get across with newsletter content is not historically something that people are excited to reply to.
Yeah, and I would just say broadly, I think with technology, what you're seeing is creation of products, creation of content is happening at a faster rate than ever before. We live in an attention economy, and it's not just attention for content, it's attention for any products. It's easier than ever before to create content or create a business. And so I think what that means is it's interesting to think about how a lot of parts of businesses have been commoditized, but the point of consumer and product having a relationship and building deep heart loyalty around that is not commoditized. And so our view is if we got that relationship right, it was a point of leverage for us. And that's why we felt so confident in going full time. And to be totally transparent, it also sounded just more fun to us than
Yeah.
what I was doing in sales and trading and what Austin was going to do in investment banking.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then Howard, what about you? You talked a little bit about this with StartEngine and what drove you to start it, but what was the motivator where you were like, I have to do this now? Like, this is the point in time when I really need to make a move.
Well, imagine I made 59 investments in 3 years, about 20 a year. And I would get on the call with these entrepreneurs, and some would be crying, others would be completely, very depressed by the situation. They would explain to me how they spent all the money we invested, and they were living on nothing. They were poor. And they were really discouraged. And I just couldn't understand it, because to me, some of those ideas were pretty good ideas, but they were maybe not the idea of the moment. And they didn't look like the VCs who like to invest in people that look like themselves. I like to call the 22-year-old white male from Stanford. They were not that model. And so I was a terrible investor because I didn't understand the rules of the game. And guess what? As an entrepreneur like Alex, you always think about, well, if the game is this way, how do you change it? And that to me is natural. This is not something I needed someone to come to tell me, hey, Howard, you need to change the rules. I knew things didn't work well. I got it. When we started Activision, it was the same thing. Everybody was talking about cartridges and these games that were very low quality resolution and music and not really beeps and sounds. And we said, no, we want to make a medium that is art form, 3D, beautiful, with real production values. And we moved the company to LA and did that. And the result is it's the largest video game company in the United States. But I think for me, StartEngine was that when I realized that these entrepreneurs could not, they were cut out of the opportunity, basically. I said, I got to change it. Status quo, no longer acceptable, was the driving factor. Now, it turns out we got lucky. The Jobs Act was signed in, within 3 years, actually within 2 years of when we were investing. So right there, I started reading it. No one talked about it. Literally, there was no conversation online, not even the Wall Street Journal, which, by the way, I read the Wall Street Journal, but I just signed up for Morning Brew because I like it. And so I'm
3,000,001 subscribers, Alex.
I redefined.
There we go.
Actually, I told my 16-year-old son, who I talked to him this morning, I told him, you sign up with it. He said he knew what it was. He said, yeah, I know what it is. I said, sign up right now. And so I think that moment was important. So the Jobs Act got voted in. No one cared about it. And I did. And I thought everybody's going to create a platform. Everybody, like literally everybody. Why? Because it's a big opportunity, and no one did. And we were the first to launch. And so I think what I've learned through that is that when you disrupt an industry, like Alex is disrupting his industry, which is mature. I'm disrupting the financial industry, which is very mature. There's a lot more opportunity than people realize, a lot more, but you have to be willing to look into it. You have to be willing to open your mind to change.
Yeah. And I think one thing that's really interesting, both of you are coming from outsiders' perspective. So it's not like Howard, you had worked in finance or fintech for 20 years before that. And Alex, like you hadn't come from this content marketing background. How do you think, how has that helped you? Like what kind of perspective did that give you that you wouldn't have otherwise had?
Yeah, I would say, and I assume Howard would agree with this, like it's an advantage. Like I think being naive to the industry was an absolute advantage because we came in with a beginner's mindset, and people spend their whole life trying to break down their preconceived notions to live with beginner's mindset. The fact that Austin and I quite literally were beginners, had no idea the way things were done in media. We didn't have these preconceived notions, right? If we had been in media prior, we would have thought, oh, wow, Wall Street Journal, Reuters, Financial Times, The Economist, these are absolute behemoths that have a ton of funding. There is no way we're going to steal audience from them. Or we would have thought email newsletters, people are saying those were supposed to die 10 years ago. We would have never said, oh, let's go start an email newsletter. And so I think it's the fact that we didn't know what we didn't know that got us to start this thing. And now it's funny because as I think about the future of media, I think I actually have to spend far more effort to re-put a beginner's mindset into my brain to not be clouded by how people think about where the industry is going.
Yeah, that's interesting. And what about you, Howard?
Well, I think, Alex, you want to not be disrupted by, I mean, you're disrupting, but then there's some people out there who are maybe at Michigan, I don't know where they are, trying to disrupt you. And you don't want that to happen, right? I think you're still new in your journey that you can still probably do it. We have this issue with crypto. You know, we don't do crypto because FINRA and SEC and all these regulators don't like crypto, but we're going to be doing crypto eventually. But we have to follow the regulation. We can't just do anything we want. So I look at disruption is we're going to be disrupted eventually. So we have to overcome that problem. How? By staying innovative. How? As we grow the company, we're now 65 people, we'll probably add another 30, 40 people in the next few months. How do you stay innovative while you grow? How do you get rid of politics? How do you do all that? These are the concerns I'm thinking about every day. What do we have to do to stay fresh, interesting, and allow us to grow into something really big, and yet not be disrupted by the next Alex, who's going to come in and say, "Hey, you guys don't know anything what you're doing, and here we're gonna disrupt you." So it's an ongoing challenge, but we're still so new in our journey. StartEngine is at its first inning right now. It's really not in a place where I would say we have any kind of maturity. Anything can happen, and this is great because that allows us to grow fast, and at the same time, not worry by looking behind us that someone's going to try and kill us every moment. That's not happening right now. We have competition. We love our competition. They don't have to die for us to win. They don't have to lose for us to win. No question. The whole marketplace is going to grow fast. But for us to be leaders, we have to keep innovating. And that's the real key.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Alex, also, I remember last night on Clubhouse, you were talking a little bit about hiring and how that works. And I think it's great when you have, a new idea and you're founding a company and you're coming in with that sort of naive mindset that you can use to your advantage. How do you keep that going with hiring? Like, what are your hiring practices? Are you looking for people who come from content marketing, who come from totally different industries? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's, I mean, to me, this is where the most learning has happened as a first-time founder. Because I think, first of all, most entrepreneurs have to be self-aware, but they also have a kind of overconfidence, a naive overconfidence about their ability to take over the world with their idea. And I think one of the ways that people think about that as first-time founders is they assume they're going to be extremely good at hiring. Like, I think most first-time founders think they have the secret sauce to see in talent what no one's ever seen, right? Like they think, they're the Simon Cowell of seeing one direction before it's one direction. And I think that the real answer is it's usually not the case. Most time people are pretty bad at hiring to start, and then you learn from your mistakes, you learn from reps, and you become better. What I would say is that the biggest lessons I've learned from hiring are it is really hard to teach curiosity. It is really hard to teach work ethic, and it's really hard to teach someone to be valued, like well valued in terms of the values that drive them in their life. And so to me, when I'm hiring people, those are the traits that I'm looking for. What I would also say is, I think this is because I'm a first-time founder and it's been my first time around with senior leadership. We've built out a senior leadership team. And I think the biggest learning has been building out a team of people who have been there before, a team of people who have built teams under them, who have set hiring plans, who have set a strategic plan. Because I think on one hand, you want people who think differently from how the industry has worked. You want enough of that, like curiosity and naive mindset and kind of enough critical questioning of the industry and the company. But I also think there are certain parts of managing that are really hard to teach that you need through reps and experience. And I think one of those is managing people, hiring people, setting a plan and executing a plan. And so what I found is at the higher levels, those are often the more high leverage decisions, meaning people at higher levels, the decisions they make have a ripple effect on the rest of the business. And so taking less risk on those positions in terms of experience that's been demonstrated before and taking more risk on the people lower down in the company who haven't maybe had the perfect experience, but come with a ton of grit, a ton of outside the box thinking, has been the formula in my mind.
Interesting. You talk a little bit about values, and that's something that's been a key part of StartEngine, especially over the past few years. Howard, can you talk more about like StartEngine's values, why that's something that we talk about and care about, and how that has led our company?
So at StartEngine, we have 6 values. And the 6 values are critical to our culture and to hiring and deciding on who stays or not at the company. We've published our 6 values. They're our own mission, which is basically helping entrepreneurs achieve their dreams, team player, care about others, stay curious, do the right thing, which is so strange in the financial industry to say do the right thing. And it's like the opposite of what they want to do. And our values are critical. Now, we also look at if the person gets it, wants it, or has the capacity to do it. So these 9 things, we rate everybody. And hiring is very hard. We have not hired pretty much anyone from the industry, from financial. I don't know. It terrifies me to hire a banker. I am so terrified. I don't know what they will say. They probably think this is a crazy business and we should go back to the old ways of doing things. That terrifies me because I'm a multiple time entrepreneur, and Alex correctly said it. He needs that support. I'm actually looking for the opposite. I want people who've never done it before and are willing to go into our journey together. And my goal is to make these people super successful in their careers, hopefully a career at StartEngine, but even if it's not at StartEngine, they can take away so much learning and opportunity from being here. That is important to me. So yes, the management team at StartEngine started with us at the beginning. So it's the same team. And these are first time, second time, maybe barely third time job opportunities for these people. And they've grown in a way that is so impressive. We've adopted the system called Entrepreneur Operating System, which Alex, you may want to look into it, EOS.
We use the same system.
Really?
Here we go.
We'll talk about our rocks after this.
Yep, exactly.
So, but Alex, that didn't exist when I started my first company. And one day I had a guy in Michigan. We were on Liberty Street. We had above, at that point was the Burger King. Now it's an office. And someone came to me and wrote me a message saying, wake up and smell the coffee. You guys have no idea what you're doing. It's horrible. You guys are awful, like a really nasty thing. And I quit. And then we thought we did something so wrong. We felt so bad about it. We're like, oh my God. But the reality was we had no idea what we were doing. We really did not understand. And I think today with things like EOS and having so much information online, you can start learning a little bit better. And so I think what Alex is doing, adopting such an innovative framework, is amazing. So I think, the world has moved forward a lot. What we're talking about today, right now, all this conversation is completely unknown in the big companies, in our respective industries. They would think we're in a different planet here, but we're not. We are on the same planet. The difference here is we're thinking differently with innovation in mind, even of how we manage a company. That's fundamental.
Yeah.
I would totally agree. And what I would say is, when we started the traction process a year and a half ago, when one of Morning Brew's investors, he used that process for his business. And Austin, my co-founder, started implementing it throughout the company. And it's been incredible. It's like you can't even imagine how you were running a company before. And it's not rocket science, but it's just a well-articulated game plan for operating a business. And it's funny because, to your point, Howard, this hasn't existed for a long time. And I think it makes me think of 2 things. One is there's never been a better time to start a business with the technology that exists to create leverage for entrepreneurs, but also playbooks that have been built to use so you don't make the same mistakes that, several generations of entrepreneurs have made. But also, I think it makes me appreciate or successful entrepreneurs who started building their business 20 years ago that developed their own systems like this, right? Like the original EOS or traction process was Andy Grove's OKR system at Intel. But then you have, like, I was just studying Salesforce. Salesforce, talk about a company that was literally the disruptor that is now being disrupted and has to disrupt itself. They established their process called V2MOM, world's worst analogy or acronym, but it was the same thing. It was values, it was vision, it was methods, it was objectives, and it was something else in the process, or it was obstacles. And it was like people at the time had to create the process rather than understand a process that already existed. So it's a huge advantage for entrepreneurs to now have these playbooks.
Well, it's the same thing as Amazon AWS. It's extraordinary. You have this extraordinary system that you can just rent for nothing and start a business with nothing. That couldn't happen before. I remember in the old days, you had to buy your servers, you had to go into a co-location facility. It was insane. It's an insane system, but that was the way. So if you raised money, the first money you raised went into hardware infrastructure and not into building your service or marketing it. And then the next money you raise is to market and et cetera, et cetera. We want to change not only the playbook, we're changing our own playbook, but we want to change the playbook for entrepreneurs. We believe that entrepreneurs should stay in control. I know it sounds strange. Because most entrepreneurs want to grab a check from a VC and give away control. They may not understand what they're actually giving away. I get that, but they are giving away control. And to me, I think an entrepreneur needs to stay in control, because that's so horrible to see your company being taken away from you. You've worked so hard, you have so many dreams and memories and aspirations and hopes, and that's taken away. It's cruel. It's so cruel. On the other hand, an entrepreneur who says, look, I'm overwhelmed, I need help, I'll get a president. That's fine. That's great. Get the president, get a coach, help yourself out. We want to tell entrepreneurs that not only you can do two things. You can stay in control, but now you can build an army of crazies, ambassadors, people who want to help you. They're your cheerleaders. Imagine if you have 10,000 cheerleaders and you're in the middle of the stadium, you're like, hey guys, I'm thinking of doing this. And everybody's screaming. It's like, okay, yeah, go ahead, Howard, do it. That's what we have. We have 30,000 cheerleaders at StartEngine. We hope to get another 30,000 so we can really fill the Michigan stadium, the big house.
There you go.
We're going to need 100,000.
It all comes back to Michigan.
So, Joanna, we need 100,000, 110,000. Okay.
But what about the Northwestern Stadium? It's smaller. It's closer to my heart.
Well, we are at 30,000. Does it fill your stadium or not? 30?
Probably.
Okay.
I think it's
so we're north, but we need. So what I want entrepreneurs to realize is there's a new form of marketing today, is when you can align your customers with your mission.
Yep.
They are part of the mission because they are shareholders. It's a crazy idea, because in the world of finance, they say, no. You want the smart guys with the smart money to own your business. And what does it mean, smart money? Because that means we're dumb money. I mean, not me, because now I have money, but all the people who don't have money are dumb money, right. But they put all their money into the pension funds and then they give it to the VCs who are smart money. So it's money laundering. I don't understand this. It makes no sense.
I will say this: when we raised our funding, which, I talked about yesterday, and it was not from VCs, it wasn't crowdfunding either. It was somewhere in between. It was our own. We crowdfunded in a very manual way. The most helpful people in our round, so we had 28 individual investors. I would say the most helpful people were the 5 people who had the smallest checks in our round. So Howard, I think, yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, because I've heard Howard talk about this a little bit before, there's a whole concept of, I need a strategic investor. I want a VC. I want this angel. I want it because it's a strategic investor. So what does that mean, and how real is that when it comes to actually getting a strategic investor?
Well, I would just say, I think Howard made this point last night where he said, strategics don't just have to come in the form of investor. And I think that's a really important point, right? You want, at the end of the day, business is simple. It's not easy, but it's simple, which is like, you are creating a product for an audience that makes their life better, or fulfills them or helps them in some way. And it's like, you want as many people on your side to help accomplish that mission. And in the same way, you want to potentially get your customers on your side to invest in you, to act as marketing for you. It's like understanding your blind spots as an entrepreneur, especially a first-time entrepreneur, is so important, so you can acquire the necessary knowledge to accomplish your goal. And I think, to Howard's point, a lot of people will bring on strategics because in theory, they have that knowledge that you don't have, that you can acquire. But I think also there is this concept that strategics aren't necessarily always in it for the right reasons, or they have a portfolio of hundreds of companies. So how much are they going to really be able to help your individual company? And you can also acquire strategic knowledge in other ways, whether it's through, freelancers and contractors, whether it's through actual employees. Like, there are other ways to acquire knowledge you don't have.
I agree, Alex. It's amazing to watch when I have entrepreneurs who come to me and say, hey, I need advice, so I'm going to go for a strategic or a VC. And I said, look, great, except that understand, in most cases, they don't know anything about your business. And if your anxiety is that you don't know anything about managing and growing to $1 billion company, that's the journey. That is the journey. And you will find out that the people who will help you most are probably the most unlikely. They could be a relative in your family. It could also be a consultant. In the case of EOS, it could be your implementer. It could be a business coach. There are so many different avenues out there. It could be as simple as finding someone who built a business like you did 20 years ago and just say to them, hey, look, I need you to mentor me. And you know what? I do this. And they will say yes. They will say yes. Why not? It's fun. They can live vicariously through the entrepreneur and maybe do it again through their eyes. And so I'm an advocate of this. Capital needs to be in the hands and control of the entrepreneur. They need capital and they need control. And if you can get an army of people who want to help you, the most unlikely things will happen, such as we have all these scouts who are sending us companies every day, and they're great companies we would have never met otherwise. And if I had one strategic at a company, I know what they would do. They would call me with anxiety phone calls about, oh, did you see your competition? Do you see this? What are you doing about it? And it's like, look, listen, but that's not helpful. Why don't you help me out? Here,
Strategic anxiety.
Give me another 20 million. How's that? That's helpful. But it doesn't work that way. I really think what we've built is such a new idea. It's so fresh. It's so disruptive. And I hope we can get the word out. I mean, that's our biggest problem. Alex, our biggest business problem at StartEngine is no one cares about us. The press, like Wall Street Journal, never writes about us. No one does. And yet we're doing so much good for entrepreneurs and allowing these investors to get in early on stuff that they read about in all the press, and they are like saying, hold on a second, I have no way in. What is my relationship to all of this? They hear about this guy invested in Uber and made millions, and now they want to be themselves in that game. So it's interesting. You're in the media. I'm curious why we're having so much trouble getting any press.
I think you need to own your own media. I think you need to be your own PR. Like, to me, I'd be thinking about constantly, how do I build content around StartEngine where people are magnetized, not to the platform first, but to the content we're creating around the people who are raising on the platform, around the startup ecosystem, and startup investing in general. Like, I would be thinking about, how do I own my audience? So I have a direct-to-consumer relationship, and I don't need the media to act as PR for me. I mean, that's how we think about Morning Brew, right? It's kind of a meta thing, but like, we don't rely on a lot on other outlets to cover us. Now that we have this owned audience of 3 million people, when there's an update in our business or we want to promote a new product, because people now have a habit with the content we create, they'll trust anything we put out, even if it's about ourselves. And so I think at the end of the day, media, unfortunately, has been hardwired to talk about massive raises, about companies going public, about unicorns. And I would say hasn't focused enough time on like the unsexiness of business, bootstrapping businesses, raising a couple $100,000. Like that's not sexy. And so I think the question is actually, it's a huge opportunity to make that sexy.
And I think also the other piece of it is, StartEngine and equity crowdfunding, it's no longer just a couple $100,000. Like we have rounds that are $24, $25 million on StartEngine from the general public. These are no longer tiny rounds. And I think changing that narrative is a big part of StartEngine's goal. How do we get that out
Even
there?
25 million in the eyes of the Wall Street Journal is nothing.
Totally.
Right.
It's interesting. If we said to the Wall Street Journal, hey, we're now helping thousands of companies raise millions, they'll say, so what? You know what's going to change the game completely? And I agree with Alex. He's right. We have to own our own content. What's going to change the game is this. One day, there will be a company coming out of StartEngine that ends up in those stratospheres, and that changes everything.
Yeah, I think it's also about how do you give the tool, how do you arm the rebels, right? This phrase "arm the rebels" was coined by Toby Lutke at Shopify, and the whole idea is 800,000 plus businesses sit on Shopify now, and their whole strategy is arming the rebels to attract people to their businesses, which in turn obviously grows Shopify as a platform. How do you think about things the same way, right? It's the prerogative of people who raise on StartEngine to attract as many people to StartEngine to fund their business. How do you give them the tools? How do you arm the rebels to act as the world's largest megaphone for your business, where you don't have to pitch yourself? Your PR, the media companies covering you are the startups raising on the platform.
It's very astute of you. I agree. That's how we started the company. Was we didn't spend any dollars in marketing. We let the companies do all the work. Right now, we hired, we brought in Kevin O'Leary. He's great. He's an advocate of this whole thing. He believes in it. He sends us his companies to raise on StartEngine. And that's helped us a lot to get the word out. We're still, I think, under the radar right now. Maybe that's an advantage. Maybe that's good. Maybe that's good that no one gets it.
They don't see us coming.
I think it's also, I think of this concept of the balloon effect, which happens with a lot of businesses, especially creators, happen with Morning Brew also, where if you think about this concept of a water balloon, right? You put up a water balloon to the spigot of a sink. You open up the faucet. Let's think of the faucet as like all the work and time you're putting into your business. That's the water, the output coming out. The business starts to fill up. You never know when the balloon is going to pop. It's going to happen at some point, but you can't time it. But the idea is you have the faith in what you're building, that the water is going to continue to fill up the balloon, and at some point it's going to burst and it's going to go everywhere. Way more surface area that the water is covering. Right. To me, that's how I think about a lot of businesses. Is there's a critical mass. You don't know when it's going to have hockey stick like impact, but you have to have faith that it's going to happen if you continue to empower the customers on your platform. And to me, that's what happened with Morning Brew as well. It's what happened with creators like, Mr. Beast or other YouTubers, Twitchers. But I think it happens with business as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That inflection point is unpredictable. It will happen. It happened when we were doing Activision. Everybody told us the video game business is dead. Okay, that's great. And when I started StartEngine, everybody said, you're going to get sued out of your existence, and no one will ever invest with a credit card. Okay, great things. The naysayers are my best advocates, because they prove that it's probably what I'm trying to do hard, and yet because it's hard and because it's a little bit out there, it's probably good. And I think entrepreneurs understand that's clear to them, because they don't see barriers. They don't see anything in front of them. And yet there are tons, every day we see a new person adding a new barrier to StartEngine. I love that, because it's a new challenge to overcome, and we do. But sometimes you go around the barriers. They don't realize that. And I don't even see the financial industry as our competitors. Not at all. I don't care. They can do what they want, continue.
Yeah, and I don't know. To me, again, I always look at things through the lens of a story, a great story to tell. And I get excited when I think about your business, because all you have is like, you don't just have businesses that are raising money. You literally have years of memorable experiences that have been created. And to me, that is so much surface area for great content to tell great stories, right? Like I gave you the example of Salesforce, and I'm writing up a whole thread on Twitter about the evolution of Salesforce. I think you could take any company on your platform. I'm literally just looking at Liquid Piston. I think you could tell as fascinating of a story about Liquid Piston as you could about Salesforce if it's story told in the right way. And you can even use that content as marketing in itself for raising money for Liquid Piston as well.
Yeah, I
Very
think that's great. So we only have a few minutes left, so I want to answer some of the questions from the audience. We actually have gotten quite a few questions related to crypto and NFTs. So this one's for you, Howard. Would you consider adding an NFT market that sells and sets up royalties?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, I've looked at NFTs when it came out. It was a smart contract on Ethereum blockchain. And I think it's a great idea, NFTs. But the problem is, I wrote an article recently, and then you can post the link for the audience to read, that I believe that the way the NFTs are being sold today, these are probably securities. And that changes a little bit the narrative, because when NFTs are not securities, they're commodity, you can do whatever you want. And the investor, well, actually, it's not an investor, the purchaser is not protected. So, how do they know that there's so many copies? Well, they know it because they can look in the blockchain, but they don't necessarily know what the platform is doing with these things. And so my view is they are securities. We'd love to put them on StartEngine. So we're talking to some NFT companies right now on StartEngine to come on StartEngine. I hope we will get that done. And we want to do it the right way. So one of our values at StartEngine is do the right thing. And so we will not put NFTs as a commodity if they are not a commodity. We just can't do that. These are securities. You're violating SEC rules. So I think there's a big potential in NFT, but we have to do it the right way. And also, it's just, again, very early in the world of that medium. It's changing the way artists are going to look at art in a fundamental way. And it's also changing the way people will acquire art. I love that. I think it's a great opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And then this is a question pretty related to it, and it's for Howard and Alex. How have the finance and financial news industries changed since you founded StartEngine and Morning Brew? Obviously, there's a lot that's been happening in the news over the past few months, but how has it changed?
What I would say is connection between consumer and supplier, or consumer and company, has never been closer, and friction to put your money to work has never been lower. And that is both an incredible thing and an incredibly scary thing, right? To me, the fact that someone reads Morning Brew for 5 minutes and makes an investing decision after 5 minutes of reading our newsletter, wildly scary to me. I think it is a positive in the way that we deliver information to an audience, that they trust it. But I think it creates more of a responsibility than ever before for us to think about, if someone's making an investment decision after 5 minutes of reading a daily roundup newsletter, what else can we do to help provide information for them to be smart with their money? Because I don't think what we can bank on is trying to make people undo behaviors. Like, I don't think we're going to stop people from putting their money to work. I think the question is how do we arm them with tools, information, content, etc., so at least we feel really good about the knowledge they have before they decide how to spend their hard-earned money or invest their hard-earned money.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then Howard, what about you? Obviously, we've had Robinhood, GameStop, Reddit. How has the finance industry changed since we started StartEngine?
I think Alex had a very good point that with the new technology out there, you're arming millions of people with information and knowledge. Reddit is a great example of a new medium that no one in the finance industry even paid attention to until now. Their view was, oh, this is a cult. That's so dismissive. It's not a cult. That's so dismissive. I love how they insult people constantly. Dumb, smart money, dumb money, cult. What they don't understand is this, is when you arm 1 million people with something, they may act. And if they act in a crowd, and we're in the business of crowd, by the way, Alex is also in the business of crowd. I'm in the business of crowd. The crowd has a wisdom. They have something to say. Yes, they are not Warren Buffett. They're not the geniuses. Okay, so what? That's okay. Look, when you watch in a stadium a football game, you feel like you're empowered by the play you see. And that's a crowd. And as the crowd reacts, you're part of that reaction. It's a great feeling. So now what we're doing the same thing online. We're creating crowds of people who have something to say. And that wisdom, I think it has not been studied by the academics out there yet. I know there's some papers around it, but not enough to explain what this is all about. And it's certainly not in the playbook of the financial industry today. It is not. And
Mhm.
hey, if they ignore it, only better for us.
Yeah, definitely true. Okay, final question. This is from Sarah. Can entrepreneurship be taught or can it only be learned through experience? Alex, you want to take that one?
Yeah,
Take it first, at least.
I'll give it a stab. So tough because I hate having the perspective that like you need to be born with something. I don't know, that notion rubs me the wrong way because I like to think that any opportunity is for the taking for someone who wants it badly enough. Look, what I'll say is I think there is a mentality around being an entrepreneur that is really hard to teach. I think it is workable, it is learnable, it is a muscle that can be built up. For me specifically, what I'll say, and when I say a mentality, I would say it's a mentality of curiosity, grit, and naive overconfidence. Like, and what I mean by that last one, I think that's the hardest one to teach, is that when we were writing Morning Brew, every one of my friends told me it was a shitty idea. Everyone we took, my mom, when I said I was quitting my job, said, "You're leaving sales and trading to not make money and put out a newsletter every day." And I think there was a certain part of my brain that was just like, I love doing this. And I think some people are born with it. For me, I think I was partially born with it. I also think like trauma in my life from losing my dad made me have perspective that like life is incredibly fickle. You never know when your last day is. So do the things that give you a ton of energy. And that generally will be a good guide for you that will lead to other successes and karma. I think that accelerates that perspective. I think it is a teachable perspective. I also think it can happen through osmosis, right? I think one of the best ways to become entrepreneurial is to spend a lot of time around other entrepreneurial people, in the same way that I think curiosity or independent thinking can rub off if you spend time around people who are super curious or super independent in thought.
Yeah, that's really great.
I agree with Alex. I think for some, I think Alex is a first-time entrepreneur, really gets it. I didn't know I was an entrepreneur. I had no idea. No one told me that. There was nothing that said, "Oh, Howard, you're an entrepreneur." My mom wanted me to have a career at IBM. And I thought of that as the most horrible idea. I was, oh, that's so depressing, a career. And I saw the role models, and Steve Jobs, Bill Gates at that time were young entrepreneurs, and I think for me the role model helped a lot. So I think look at who your role models are, and then maybe that gives you an inspiration to do things. Entrepreneurs are born just probably randomly. I don't think it's a way you go to school and you say, okay, I'll be an entrepreneur. You can. My son's at Babson and he's learning entrepreneurship. I know that Michigan has an amazing school, the Ross School, with some great entrepreneurs and clubs. I think it's exposure. I think what Alex says is right. It's exposure. Is hang out with the entrepreneurs, and you may be finding it interesting enough, or just partner up, become a co-founder. So your first, the one co-founder is the crazy one, and you're like the one who's like a little bit more stable, and that relationship is important. And I think that's part of the journey. The real key at the end of the day is the entrepreneur is a journey, and it's not about the money, and it's not about that. It's just about having that experience and going through it. And it's hard. It's probably the hardest thing that anyone can do. It's a lot harder than taking a job and succeeding or getting fired. So what? But being an entrepreneur, the responsibility of that you hold on yourself is tremendous. And at the same time, the reward is a journey. And that, at the end of the day, to me, that's what matters.
That's great. Okay, well, thank you both. So this is the end of this webinar, but I know we have a ton of questions we didn't have time to answer. We're going to send out a recording of this. You can respond with your questions. And again, if you're interested in StartEngine, either on the investing side or raising money, you can go to startengine.com. And if you want to read a daily newsletter that breaks down all the most complicated things into digestible chunks, then you can go to Morning Brew. So Alex and Howard, thank you so much. This was really great.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you, Joanna.
Thanks, everyone. Take it easy.